The police station in Utqiagvik, Alaska, the northernmost town in the United States, has a rotary phone mounted on the back wall of the records room that hasn't been used for official business since 1983. The handset is harvest gold, the cord frayed at both ends, and someone has written Line 7 on a strip of masking tape stuck to the base. During the summer months, when the midnight sun hangs above the Arctic Ocean for 82 straight days, the phone stays silent, dead plastic and copper wire, nothing more. But during polar night, those 65 days from mid-November to late January when the sun never rises above the horizon, Line 7 rings. My name is Cole Hendricks. I transferred to the Utqiagvik Police Department from Anchorage 18 months ago, chasing a promotion and running from a divorce I still don't like talking about. The department is small. 2 sergeants, 6 officers, and a civilian dispatcher named Ruth Panageo, who's worked here since before I was born. The station sits on Akavak Street, a squat building with reinforced windows designed to withstand winds that can hit 60 miles per hour during winter storms. I arrived in September, when the sun was still setting and rising like it does everywhere else. The town felt remote but manageable. 3 grocery stores, a hospital, a college, a handful of restaurants. 2,500 people spread across the tundra at the top of the world. Cold, yes. Isolated, definitely. But not strange. Then November came, and the sun dipped below the horizon on the 18th and didn't come back up. I had read about polar night before taking the job, understood it intellectually, but nothing prepares you for the reality of perpetual darkness. Not twilight, not dusk, but true night that stretches on for weeks without relief. The stars wheel overhead at noon. The northern lights paint the sky while you eat lunch. Your body forgets what time means, and your mind starts to follow. On my 3rd day of polar night, Sergeant Anna Okakok handed me a laminated card with 6 rules printed on it. "Memorize these," she said. Her voice was flat, matter-of-fact, the tone of someone explaining how to fill out paperwork rather than something that would keep me alive. "Don't ask questions tonight. Just follow them exactly. We'll talk tomorrow, after you understand why they exist." I looked at the card. The rules were typed in the plain font, no explanations, no context. What happens if I don't follow them? Anna's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. A shadow of memory, maybe, or fear she'd learned to bury deep. "Then you become one of the reasons we have the rules," she said. That night, November 21st, I worked my first overnight shift during polar night. By 2:17 a.m., I understood exactly what Anna meant. Line 7 rang, and the voice on the other end had been dead for 3 days. The laminated card sat on my desk for the first 4 hours in my shift. I kept glancing at it between paperwork, reading the rules over and over, trying to make them fit into some framework of reality I could accept. Rule 1. Between November 18th and January 23rd, Line 7 will ring between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. Answer every call. Do not let it go to voicemail. The voicemail system cannot hold what comes through that line. Rule 2. When you answer, do not speak, do not respond, do not ask questions. Write down everything the caller says, word for word. Use the logbook in the top drawer of the records room desk, the one with the black leather cover. Do not use any other paper. Rule 3. The callers will identify themselves by name and describe where they are. These descriptions are accurate. Use them to locate remains when possible. Families deserve closure. Rule 4. If a caller asks you a direct question, hang up immediately. Do not answer. Do not engage. Some of them are learning to do more than report. Rule 5. If you hear your own voice on line 7, do not panic. Write down what you hear exactly as spoken. This information may save your life. It may not, but you must document it regardless. Rule 6. Never tell the callers that they are dead. They do not always know. Telling them can cause complications. I set the card down and stared at the records room door. Through the frosted glass, I could see the shape of the old rotary phone mounted on the wall. Harvest gold, Anna had called it. The color of something that had been white once, years ago, before age and cigarette smoke and whatever else had stained it. At 1:45 a.m., I made coffee. Strong, black, the kind that tastes like it could strip paint. The station was quiet. Just me and Ruth at dispatch, monitoring radio silence and the occasional drunken, disorderly call from the Top of the World Hotel on Agvik Street. The darkness outside pressed against the windows like something solid, like if I opened the door, it would pour in and fill the room. At 2:14 a.m., I heard it. A ringing. Mechanical, old-fashioned, the kind of bell clatter that phones haven't made since the 1970s. It came from the records room, muffled by the door but unmistakable. Line 7. I grabbed the logbook from the drawer, black leather, soft with age, filled with pages of cramped handwriting going back decades. The earliest entry I could find was dated November 1957. The handwriting was different on every page. Dozens of officers documented calls they shouldn't have been able to receive. I pushed open the records room door. The phone was ringing, the handset vibrating slightly in its cradle, and the sound filled the small space like something physical. I picked it up. Static. Deep, layered static, like wind blowing across a frozen plain 1,000 miles away. Then a voice. Female. Older, maybe 60s or 70s, with a slight accent of someone who'd grown up speaking Inupiaq before English. This is Margaret Tulik. I fell through the ice 2 days ago near the point. I was checking my grandson's crab pots because he's been sick with the flu and I didn't want him out in the cold. I wrote. My hand moved across the page without conscious direction, transcribing every word. The ice looked solid. It wasn't. I went through so fast I didn't have time to scream. The water. I can't describe the water. Cold doesn't cover it. It was like being erased. Like my body stopped being a body and became just pain. The static surged, crackled, faded. I'm at the bottom now. I can see the ice above me. There's light coming through it, that blue-green light you only see from underneath. And there's something else down here. Shapes, moving in the dark water. They have lights on them, like the anglerfish my husband used to show me in his books. But they're too big. They're so much bigger than fish. A pause. The static hummed. The beautiful. I'm not scared anymore. I think they're coming to get me. I think. The line went dead. I sat there for a long moment, phone pressed to my ear, listening to the empty hiss of a disconnected call. Then I set the handset back in its cradle and looked at what I'd written. Margaret Tulik. Fell through ice, near the point, checking grandson's crab pots. I walked back to the main office, sat down at my computer, and searched our missing persons database. Margaret Tulik, age 71, reported missing November 19th. Last seen walking toward Point Barrow with an ice pick and a bucket. Search suspended due to weather conditions. Body not yet recovered. She'd been dead for 2 days when she called the station. I looked at the logbook in my hands, at the pages and pages of names and descriptions stretching back 67 years. This was real. All of it was real. Over the next 3 weeks, I took 19 calls on line 7. Each one followed the same pattern, the mechanical ring cutting through the silence of the records room, the static that sounded like wind across frozen tundra, the voice identifying themselves and describing where they were, what had happened, what they could see in the darkness. I wrote every word in the black logbook, filling page after page with testimony from people who shouldn't have been able to speak. A hunter named William Nageek called on November 28th. He'd gone out on a snowmobile to check his trap lines near Elson Lagoon and never came back. His voice was calm, almost peaceful as he described being inside the snow, not buried beneath it, but somehow within it, as if the blizzard that had killed him had absorbed his consciousness into itself. "I can feel the wind," he said through the static. "But I'm not cold anymore. I'm part of the cold now. I can see the whole tundra from up here, spreading out in every direction. It's beautiful. I didn't know dying could be beautiful." We found his body the next day, half a mile from his overturned snowmobile, curled into a fetal position in a snowdrift. The coroner said he'd died of hypothermia. His face was peaceful, almost smiling. On December 3rd, a bush pilot named Ellen Frankson called from what she described as the moment before impact that never ends. Her Cessna had gone down somewhere between Utqiagvik and Wainwright during a supply run. The wreckage hadn't been located. Weather had grounded all search aircraft for a week. "I can see the ground coming up," she said, her voice strangely detached. "It's been coming up for days, or maybe hours. I can't tell anymore. Time doesn't work right here. The instruments are spinning. The altimeter says I'm at 12,000 feet and also at 0, both numbers at once. I think this is what happens when you die in the air. You just keep falling forever, waiting for the crash that already happened." Her coordinates, as best as she could describe them, led a search team to a frozen riverbed 40 miles southeast of town. The Cessna was there, nose down in the ice, Ellen still strapped into the pilot's seat. She'd been dead for 11 days. But the call that stayed with me, the one that woke me up in the middle of my sleep cycles, that made me dread the hours between 2 and 4 a.m., came on December 9th. A child's voice. Young, maybe 7 or 8 years old, speaking in Nupiaq at first, then switching to English when I didn't respond. "My name is Thomas Asuak." I went outside to find my dog. He ran away when the lights came, the pretty lights in the sky. I wrote as fast as I could, my pen scratching across the page. "Mama told me not to go outside during polar night without a grown-up. But Nanook was barking and barking, and then he ran toward the lights, and I followed him because he's my best friend, and I didn't want him to get lost." The static shifted, deepened, took on a quality that sounded almost like breathing. "The lights aren't lights. I know that now. They look like lights from far away, but when you get close, there's something else. They're alive. They move like water, but they're in the sky. And they notice me looking at them." A pause. When Thomas spoke again, his voice had changed. Still a child's voice, but older somehow, carrying knowledge no child should have. "I'm inside the lights now. Inside the aurora. It's not cold here. It's not anything here. There's no ground and no sky and no up or down, just the lights, moving around me, moving through me. I think they're eating me. But it doesn't hurt. It feels like being forgotten, like everyone I ever knew is forgetting me at the same time, and when they're done forgetting, I won't exist anymore." Another pause. "Tell my mama I'm sorry about Nanook. I never found him. I hope he's okay." The line went dead. I sat in the records room for a long time after that call, staring at the page where I'd written Thomas Asok's final words. The station was silent. Ruth had gone home at midnight, and I was alone with the hum of the heating system and the weight of the darkness outside. Thomas Asok. The name wasn't in our missing persons database. I searched the regional records, the state records, the FBI database we had access to for serious cases. Nothing. But when I opened the black logbook to earlier pages, decades earlier, I found him. November 1962. A different officer's handwriting, cramped and hurried. Thomas Asok, age 7. Went outside to chase his dog during an Aurora event. Body never recovered. Mother reported seeing him walk toward the northern lights and disappear. 62 years ago, Thomas Asok had been dead for 62 years, and he was still calling Line 7, still trapped inside the Aurora, still being slowly forgotten out of existence. I closed the logbook. My hands were shaking. The next morning, I found Anna in her office, filling out paperwork with the methodical patience of someone who'd learned to make peace with bureaucracy. I sat down across from her without asking permission. "The calls," I said. "They're not just recent deaths. Some of them are old, decades old." Anna didn't look up from her paperwork. "The oldest one in the log is from 1957. A radar technician from the DEW line station who walked outside during a blizzard and never came back. He called the station 3 days after he died. He's still calling sometimes, during the worst storms. Says he can see the radar dish spinning through the snow, but he can't find his way back to the door." "How is that possible?" Anna set down her pen, looked at me with eyes that held 60 years of polar nights, 60 years of impossible phone calls, 60 years of writing down the words of the dead. "You're asking the wrong question," she said. "The question isn't how it's possible. The question is, what do we do with what they tell us?" She slid a folder across the desk. Inside were photographs, bodies recovered based on information from Line 7 calls. Dozens of them. Men, women, children, elders, people who would have been lost forever to the ice and snow if someone hadn't answered the phone and written down what they said. "The dead call us because they need to be found," Anna said. "They need someone to know where they are, what happened to them. They need to be remembered. That's what Line 7 is for. Not to scare us, not to haunt us, to help us bring them home." I looked at the photographs, at the faces of people I'd never met, pulled from the frozen earth because a voice on an old rotary phone had told us where to look. "And the ones we can't find?" I asked. "The ones like Thomas Asok, trapped somewhere we can't reach?" Anna's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes went dark. "Those are the ones that keep calling, year after year, waiting for someone to figure out how to bring them home, too." She picked up her pen, returned to her paperwork. "Keep answering the phone call. Keep writing it down. Someday, someone will figure it out. Maybe that someone is you." December 14th, 26 days in the polar night. The darkness had started to feel permanent, like the sun was a myth I'd invented to comfort myself. I'd stopped checking the clock to see what time it was. The numbers didn't matter when noon looked identical to midnight, when the only difference between morning and evening was whether the stars had shifted position overhead. I was eating lunch in the station break room, reheated caribou stew that Ruth had brought in, thick and gamey and exactly what my body needed to fight the cold, when the call came through on the main dispatch line. "Utqiagvik PD, this is Officer Hendricks." Stabik. Then a voice I didn't recognize. Male, middle-aged, speaking with the flat affect of someone reading from a script. "There's been an accident on Stevenson Road. Single vehicle. Driver unresponsive." I grabbed my jacket. Can you give me more details? Location? Vehicle description? Stevenson Road, mile marker 4, blue pickup truck. The driver is already dead. He's been dead for 6 hours. But he doesn't know it yet. The line clicked. Dead air. I stared at the phone in my hand. The call had come through dispatch, not line 7. That wasn't supposed to happen. The rules were clear. The dead called line 7. Only line 7. Only between 2 and 4 a.m. But I grabbed my keys anyway and drove out the Stevenson Road. The pickup was exactly where the caller had said. A blue Ford F-250, nose down in the drainage ditch, headlights still burning against the snow. I pulled up behind it, left my engine running for warmth, and approached with my flashlight sweeping the scene. The driver's side door was open. The cab was empty. No blood. No signs of struggle. Just an empty truck with the keys still in the ignition and the radio playing static on a station that didn't exist. I searched the surrounding area for an hour, found footprints leading away from the truck, heading north toward the coast. But they disappeared after 50 yards. Not covered by fresh snow, just gone, as if the person making them had stopped existing mid-stride. When I got back to the station, I ran the plates. The truck belonged to a man named Peter Ida, 53 years old, a maintenance worker at the Ukpiajvik Inupiat Corporation. His wife had reported them missing that morning when he didn't come home from his overnight shift. 6 hours ago. The caller had said he'd been dead for 6 hours. I checked the timestamp on the dispatch call. It had come in at 12:47 p.m. Peter's wife had called at 7 a.m. to report him missing. If the caller was right about the time of death, Peter had died around 6:47 a.m., almost exactly when his shift was supposed to end. We found his body 3 days later, a quarter mile from where the footprints had vanished. He was sitting upright against a piece of driftwood, facing north, eyes open and frozen solid. The coroner estimated time of death at approximately 7 a.m. on December 14th, 6 hours before the call. Someone, something, had called dispatch to report a death that hadn't happened yet. That night, I stayed late at the station, reading through the black logbook page by page, looking for patterns, for explanations, for anything that might help me understand what was happening. The entries went back 67 years, thousands of calls, thousands of dead voices describing thousands of deaths. Most of them were straightforward. People who died during polar night, calling to report where their bodies could be found. Tragic, yes. Impossible, certainly. But consistent, predictable, following rules that someone had figured out decades ago. But scattered among the normal entries were others, anomalies. A call from 1971 where the dead person described events that wouldn't happen for another week. A building collapse that killed 3 workers at the Naval Research Station. A call from 1984 where a woman reported her own murder, naming her killer 12 hours before she was actually killed. The police arrested the man based on the recording. He confessed. A call from 1993 where the caller didn't identify themselves at all, just breathed into the phone for 3 minutes, heavy and wet, before whispering, "It's coming," and hanging up. The next day, a blizzard hit Utqiagvik that killed 7 people in 48 hours. The dead weren't just reporting their deaths. Sometimes they were warning about deaths that hadn't occurred yet. Sometimes they knew things they shouldn't have been able to know. And sometimes, according to a note scrawled in the margin of the 1978 entry, they lied. I found Anna in her office the next morning, earlier than usual, nursing a cup of coffee that smelled like it was more whiskey than caffeine. "The call about Peter Ida," I said, sitting down across from her. "It came through dispatch, not line 7. Anna nodded slowly. "It happens sometimes. When polar night goes long enough, the boundaries start to blur. The dead find other ways to reach us. The caller knew he was dead before he died. Yes. How is that possible? Anna set down her cup. Her eyes were bloodshot, ringed with dark circles that spoke of too many sleepless nights. There's a theory, she said. Ruth's grandmother told it to me years ago. She was an elder, a storyteller. She said the polar night isn't just an absence of sunlight. It's a thinning. The barrier between the living world and whatever comes after gets weaker when the sun goes away. Thin enough that the dead can call through. Thin enough that time stops flowing in one direction. She leaned forward. During polar night, the dead can see forward and backward. They exist in all their moments at once. The moment of their death, the moment of their birth, every moment in between. When they call us, they're calling from all of those moments simultaneously. That's why some of them report deaths that haven't happened yet. To them, the death has already occurred. It's already always been occurring. I thought about Peter Ida, sitting against that driftwood, eyes frozen open, staring north at darkness that would last for another 5 weeks. What about Rule 5? I asked, hearing your own voice on the line. Anna's expression changed. The exhaustion was still there, but something else crept in beneath it, something that looked almost like fear. That's only happened 3 times in the history of this department, she said. 1961, 1989, 2007. 3 officers heard their own voices on Line 7, warning them about their own deaths. What happened to them? Anna picked up her coffee cup, took a long sip, set it back down. The first 2 didn't listen. They died exactly as predicted, exactly when predicted. The third one, a woman named Grace Tuvok, she listened, changed her behavior, avoided the circumstances her future self had described. Anna paused. She survived. Retired in 2015. Lives in Fairbanks now with her grandchildren. So it's possible to change it. To survive. It's possible, Anna agreed. But here's the thing about Grace. She said the hardest part wasn't changing her actions. It was believing that the voice was really hers. That she wasn't being tricked by something that wanted her to do exactly what it said. She looked at me with those tired, knowing eyes. The dead don't always tell the truth, Call. And during polar night, not everything that calls us is actually dead. I left her office with more questions than answers, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Anna was preparing me for something, warning me about something she couldn't say directly. That night, December 15th, I worked the overnight shift alone. At 3:33 a.m., Line 7 rang, and when I answered, I heard my own voice on the other end. The voice on the other end of Line 7 was mine. Not similar to mine, not a recording or an imitation, but my exact voice, down to the slight rasp I'd developed from breathing dry Arctic air for 3 months. "This is Officer Cole Hendricks," the voice said. "I'm calling from 3 days in the future, December 18th. I'm dead." My hand tightened on the receiver. The logbook sat open on the desk in front of me, pen resting in the crease between pages. Rule 5 said to write everything down. My fingers wouldn't move. I walked outside. My voice continued. Into the polar night. Something was in the sky. Something that looked like the sun. Everyone was talking about it, saying polar night was ending early, saying we should go outside and celebrate. Static crackled through the line, thick and layered, like ice forming on open water. It wasn't the sun. I don't know what it was. But when I looked at it, When I really looked, I saw something inside the light. Shapes. Moving. Watching. And then the light moved toward me and everything went cold. And now I'm somewhere else. Somewhere dark. I can hear other voices here. Other people who looked at the false sun. We're all here together. But we can't find each other. We just keep calling out, hoping someone will answer. I forced my hand to move, wrote down the words in shaking script that barely resembled my handwriting. "Don't trust anyone who says the sun is coming back early," my voice said. "Don't believe them when they say polar night is ending. It's not. It's never ending this year. The darkness is staying. And the thing pretending to be the sun, it's hungry. It's been hungry for a long time." A pause. The static shifted, took on a rhythmic quality that sounded almost like breathing. "I'm sorry I couldn't stop it. I'm sorry I didn't listen. But maybe you will. Maybe you'll be smarter than I was." The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, receiver pressed to my ear, listening to the empty hiss of a disconnected call. The records room felt smaller than before, the walls pressing in, the harvest gold phone sitting in its cradle like something venomous. December 18th, 3 days away. I looked at what I'd written. The words stared back at me, my own death recorded in my own handwriting, a document from a future that hadn't happened yet. Don't trust anyone who says the sun is coming back early. The rest of my shift passed in a blur. I answered 2 more calls on mine 7, a fisherman who'd fallen through ice near Browerville, an elder who'd wandered away from the assisted living facility on Momagana Street and frozen to death behind the Presbyterian Church. I wrote down their words, documented their locations, filed the reports that would help recovery teams find their bodies. But my mind kept circling back to the call, to my own voice, speaking from a darkness I couldn't imagine, warning me about something I didn't understand. When my shift ended at 7 a.m., I didn't go home. I drove to Ruth's house instead, a small place on Okavok Street, 3 blocks from the station, with smoke rising from the chimney and a light burning in the kitchen window. Ruth answered the door in a bathrobe, coffee cup in hand, not surprised to see me standing on her porch in the pre-dawn darkness that wasn't really pre-dawn at all. "Anna called," she said. "Told me you might come by. Something about line 7. I followed her into the kitchen. The room was warm, cluttered with the comfortable debris of a life lived in one place for decades. Photographs on the refrigerator, herbs drying over the sink, a calendar on the wall with dates marked in red ink. "I heard my own voice," I said. "On the phone, calling from December 18th, telling me I'm going to die." Ruth sat down at her kitchen table, gestured for me to do the same. Her face was calm, unsurprised, as if officers showed up at her door every week claiming to have received calls from their future dead selves. "My grandmother used to tell a story," she said, "about the polar night and the things that live inside it. She said the darkness isn't empty. It's full. Full of spirits, full of memories, full of moments that haven't happened yet. During the long night, all of those things press against our world, trying to get in." She took a sip of her coffee. "Most of them just want to be remembered. They call line 7 because they need someone to know they existed, someone to find their bodies, someone to tell their families what happened. Those ones are safe. Sad, but safe. And the others?" Ruth's expression darkened. "The others are hungry. They've been in the darkness so long they've forgotten what it was like to be alive. They want to feel again, warmth, light, connection. And sometimes they find ways to trick people into joining them." I thought about my voice on the phone, about the shapes inside the false sun. "The call I got," I said. "It warned me not to go outside, not to look at something that's pretending to be the sun. Is that one of the hungry ones, trying to trick me?" Ruth was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, more careful. "There's an old story about a light that appears during polar night. My grandmother called it the Kalupalix lantern, a false light that mimics the sun to draw people out of their homes. In the old days, hunters would see it on the ice and follow it, thinking the sun was returning early. They'd walk for miles, chasing something that was always just beyond the horizon, until they collapsed from exhaustion and cold." She set down her coffee cup. "The story says the light isn't natural. It's something alive, something ancient, something that came down from the sky before people lived here. It sleeps during the summer, when the midnight sun burns it back into hiding. But during polar night, when the darkness goes on long enough, it wakes up, and it feeds." I stared at her. "You saying there's something out there, something real, not just spirits on a phone line?" "I'm saying the phone line exists because the spirits are real," Ruth said. "And if the spirits are real, then the other things, the old things, the hungry things, they're real too." She reached across the table and placed her hand on mine. Her skin was warm, papery with age, surprisingly strong. "Your voice told you not to go outside, not to look at the false sun. That's good advice, Cole. That's the kind of advice that keeps people alive. But what if other people see it? What if the whole town goes outside?" Ruth's grip tightened. "Then you stay inside and answer line 7. Because when this is over, if this is over, someone will need to document what happened. Someone will need to remember the names of everyone who walked into the light and didn't come back." She released my hand, stood up, walked to the window and stared out at the darkness that pressed against the glass like something solid. "December 18th is 3 days away. Between now and then, watch the sky. Watch the people around you. And if anyone at all, starts talking about the sun coming back early, don't argue with them. Don't try to convince them they're wrong. Just stay inside and wait for it to pass." She turned back to face me. "The hungry things can't come inside. Not unless you invite them. That's the one rule that's older than all the others. Older than Mine 7. Older than the station. Older than the town itself. As long as you stay inside, with the doors closed and the windows covered, they can't touch you." I drove home as the stars wheeled overhead in their endless polar night rotation. The town was quiet, streets empty, lights burning in windows like small defiances against the dark. 3 days. I had 3 days to figure out how to survive something that had already killed me. December 16th, 2 days before my predicted death. I woke to the sound of my neighbor's children playing outside, the voices carrying through the thin walls of my apartment on Ockpick Street. Laughter, shouting, the thump of snowballs against parked cars. Normal sounds, happy sounds. But it was 11 a.m. and the sky was still black, and those children were playing in darkness that wouldn't lift for another 5 weeks. I pulled back my curtain and looked outside. The street was lit by porch lights and the orange glow of sodium lamps, the same artificial illumination that had replaced some nights since mid-November. 3 kids were building a snowman in front of the duplex across the street, their breath fogging in the cold, their shadows stretching long and strange beneath the electric lights. Nothing unusual, nothing wrong. But as I watched, one of the children, a girl, maybe 9 years old, wearing a pink parka and snow boots, stopped what she was doing and looked up at the sky. She stood perfectly still for a long moment, head tilted back, staring at something I couldn't see from my window. Then she pointed. "Look," she said, her voice carrying clear across the silent street. "Look at the light." The other children looked up. Their mother came out onto the porch, drawn by their voices, and she looked up too. I pressed my face against the cold glass, craning my neck to see what they were seeing. Nothing. Just darkness. Just stars and the faint green shimmer of aurora on the northern horizon. But they kept staring. All of them. Frozen in place, faces turned toward a patch of empty sky, as if something magnificent was unfolding just beyond my range of vision. After 3 minutes, they went back to building their snowman. The mother went back inside. The children laughed and played like nothing had happened. I didn't leave my apartment for the rest of the day. That evening, I drove to the station for my shift. The roads were quiet, quieter than usual even for polar night, and the few people I saw on the streets all seemed to be looking at the sky. Not constantly, not obviously, but in quick glances, furtive looks upward, as if checking on something they expected to see. Ruth was at the dispatch desk when I arrived. Her face was drawn, older than it had looked 2 days ago, and her hands shook slightly as she poured coffee into a styrofoam cup. "You've seen it," she said, not a question. "I've seen people looking at something, but I don't see anything when I look." "That's because you're not supposed to see it yet." The lantern shows itself slowly, first to the children, then to the elders, then to everyone else. By the time you can see it, it's already too late for most people. She handed me the coffee. I took it, grateful for the warmth against my palms. "How many people?" I asked. "I don't know. Dozens, maybe. I've been getting calls all day. People wanting to report a strange light in the sky. People saying polar night is ending early. People asking if there's been an announcement about the sun coming back." She shook her head. "I've been telling them it's just aurora activity. Most of them believe me. Some of them don't." Anna arrived an hour later, stomping snow off her boots, her face grim beneath her fur-lined hood. She pulled me into her office and closed the door. "The Inupiat Heritage Center called," she said. "They've had 17 people come in today asking about old stories. Stories about false lights during polar night. Stories about the Kalupalix lantern." She sat down heavily in her chair. "Nobody's asked about those stories in 40 years. Not since 1984. "What happened in 1984? Anna was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was flat, controlled, the voice of someone reciting facts they'd rather not remember. December 1984. 37 days in the polar night. People started seeing a light on the southern horizon. A glow that looked like dawn, even though dawn wasn't supposed to come for another month. It started small, just a handful of reports, but it spread. Within 3 days, half the town was talking about the sun coming back early. She opened a drawer, pulled out a folder, slid it across the destiny. On December 19th, 1984, 214 people walked out of Utqiagvik toward the light. Men, women, children, elders. They walked south across the tundra in the middle of the night, following something only they could see. Search parties found most of them the next day. Hypothermic, frostbitten, confused. 63 of them couldn't be found at all. I opened the folder. Inside with photographs, newspaper clippings, official reports. The photograph showed people in hospital beds, faces and fingers blackened by frostbite. The newspaper headlines were stark. Mass hysteria grips Arctic town. Polar night psychosis blamed for walkout. 63 still missing after mysterious event. Polar night psychosis, Anna said. That's what the official report called it. A mass hallucination caused by prolonged darkness and vitamin D deficiency. The government sent doctors, psychologists, counselors. They handed out light therapy boxes and vitamin supplements and told everyone it was a medical condition. Nothing supernatural, nothing to be afraid of. She leaned forward. But Ruth's grandmother was there. She saw what happened. She told Ruth the light was real. Not a hallucination, not psychosis, but something alive and hungry that comes when the darkness lasts too long. She said the 63 people who were never found didn't die of exposure. They were taken, pulled into the light, and consumed. I thought about my own voice on 9/7, calling from the darkness where other victims wandered, unable to find each other. It's happening again, I said. Yes, and it's happening faster this time. In 1984, it took 2 weeks for the sightings to spread. This time, it's been 2 days. Anna's jaw tightened. Something's different. Something's making it stronger. That night, I took 11 calls on line 7. The first was from an old man named Harold Kunuk, who had walked out of his house on Appayak Street 3 hours earlier and hadn't been seen since. His voice came through the static, calm and wondering, describing a light that moved like water, but sang to him in a language he almost understood. I know I should be cold, he said, but I'm not. The light is warm. It feels like summer. It feels like being young again, like running across the tundra with my brothers before any of us knew what death was. The second call was from a teenager named Jessica Nyakik, who had snuck out of her parents' house to meet friends and never arrived. She was crying, her voice breaking with terror. I saw my grandmother, she said, in the light. She's been dead for 3 years, but she was there, waving at me, telling me to come closer. And I wanted to. I wanted to so bad. But when I got close, her face changed. It wasn't her face anymore. It was something wearing her face, something with too many teeth. And I ran, but now I'm lost, and I don't know where I am, and it's so dark, and I can hear it, following me. The line went dead. I called dispatch, gave them Jessica's description, her last known location. Ruth dispatched the on-duty officers, but her voice was strained, exhausted. That's the 5th missing person tonight, she said. We're running out of people to send. The calls kept coming. A fisherman who'd gone to check his nets and never came back. A nurse who'd left the hospital on her break and vanished before she reached her car. A married couple who'd gone for a walk to see the beautiful light and were now somewhere in the frozen darkness, holding hands, waiting for something they couldn't describe to finish what it had started. By 4 a.m., when Line 7 finally fell silent, I had documented 19 deaths. 19 people who had seen the false sun and followed it into oblivion. I sat in the records room, surrounded by the weight of the black logbook and 67 years of impossible phone calls, and tried to understand what was happening. The lantern was feeding, drawing people out of their homes, out of safety, into a light that wasn't light at all, but something ancient and hungry wearing the shape of hope. And it was working. Person by person, call by call, the town was being consumed. But I was still alive, still inside, still following the rules. My voice had told me not to trust anyone who said the sun was coming back early. It had told me not to go outside. It had told me the darkness was staying forever. Maybe that was the key. Maybe survival wasn't about fighting the lantern or exposing it or warning people away. Maybe survival was simply about refusing to participate, staying inside, keeping my eyes on the ground, letting the hungry things starve for lack of willing victims. I looked at the logbook, at the pages and pages of names stretching back decades. Ruth had said the dead just needed to be witnessed, needed someone to write down their final words, to remember they existed, to carry their stories forward into the light that would eventually return. Maybe that was my purpose. Not to save everyone. I couldn't save everyone. But to document what was happening. To make sure that when polar night finally ended, there would be a record, a memorial, a list of names that wouldn't be forgotten. I picked up my pen. December 18th was 36 hours away. I wasn't going outside. I wasn't looking at the sky. I wasn't going to become another voice on line 7, crying out from a darkness I couldn't escape. I was going to sit at this desk, answer every call, and write down every word. And when it was over, I was going to make sure the world knew what had happened in Utqiagvik. During the winter, the sun refused to return. December 17th. One day left. I hadn't slept in 31 hours. The coffee had stopped working somewhere around hour 20, leaving me in a state of buzzing exhaustion that felt like being underwater. Everything muffled, distant, slightly unreal. But I couldn't sleep. Couldn't close my eyes without seeing the faces of the people who'd called line 7. Without hearing Jessica Nayek's voice describing her dead grandmother's face splitting open into something wrong. The station was chaos. Missing person reports had overwhelmed our system by noon. 47 people unaccounted for since the previous evening. 47 families calling dispatch, begging for information, demanding search parties that we didn't have the manpower to send. The 2 other officers on duty, Mike Agik and Danny Tuvak, Grace's nephew, had been out on the tundra since dawn, following tracks and tips and desperate hopes. They'd found 11 people so far, all of them dead, all of them frozen in place, faces turned toward the southern horizon, expressions of peaceful wonder locked on the features that would never move again. I stayed inside, answered phones, documented everything. At 2:15 p.m., Anna called me into her office. She looked worse than I felt. Eyes sunken, skin gray, hands trembling as she poured whiskey into her coffee without bothering to hide it. "The mayor's office called," she said. "They want to make an announcement. A press conference at 5 p.m. in front of the Heritage Center." "An announcement about what?" Anna's laugh was hollow, brittle. "About the sun. They're going to tell everyone the polar night is ending early, that scientists have confirmed unusual solar activity, but the sun will be visible on the horizon by tomorrow morning, that everyone should gather outside to witness this historic, astronomical event." I stared at her. "That's insane. Polar night doesn't end until late January. The sun can't just—" "I know." Anna cut me off. "I told them that. Showed them the astronomical data, the historical records, everything. They looked at me like I was the crazy one. The mayor, the city council members, even the meteorologists from the weather station. They all say they can see it. A glow on the horizon, getting brighter every hour." She took a long drink from her cup. "They're planning a celebration. A community gathering at midnight tonight. Everyone outside, together, watching the sun rise for the first time in 29 days. Her voice cracked. "They're going to lead everyone in town directly into that thing's mouth. I thought about the prophecy from my own voice. December 18th. Everyone going outside to celebrate. The false sun consuming them all. We have to stop it, I said. How? Half the town is already infected, seeing things, believing things, preparing for a dawn that isn't coming. The other half is grieving their missing family members or too scared to leave their homes. Anna shook her head. We can't arrest everyone. We can't lock down the whole town. We don't have the authority or the manpower. Then what do we do? Anna was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, resigned. We do what we've always done. We answer line 7. We document the dead. We make sure someone survives to remember what happened. She looked at me with eyes that held too much knowledge, too much grief. That's all we can do, Cole. That's all we've ever been able to do. I left her office feeling hollow, walked through the station like a ghost, past dispatch where Ruth was fielding calls with mechanical precision, past the break room where someone had left a pot of coffee burning the sludge, past the records room where line 7 sat silent on its cradle, waiting for the night to bring more voices. At 4:30 p.m., I was sitting at my desk when the front door opened and a woman walked in. She was in her 60s, a Nupiak, wearing a traditional parka with intricate beadwork along the hood. Her face was weathered but calm, and she moved with the careful deliberation of someone who had learned to conserve energy against the cold. She looked around the station, then walked directly to my desk and sat down in the chair across from me without asking permission. "You're the one who answers the phone," she said. "Not a question." "I'm one of the officers who works overnight, yes." "My name is Agnes Hobson. My grandmother was Mary Hobson. She was a storyteller, like Ruth's grandmother. They were friends." Agnes folded her hands in her lap, studying my face with dark, knowing eyes. "Ruth told me about you, about the call you received, about December 18th. I didn't know what to say." I nodded. "My grandmother told me stories about the lantern when I was a girl," Agnes continued. "She said it comes when the darkness grows too heavy, when too many people have forgotten the old ways. It feeds on forgetting, on people who don't remember what the polar night really means." "What does it mean?" Agnes smiled, but there was sadness in it. "The polar night is a time of reflection, a time when the world goes quiet and the spirits of the dead can speak to those who listen. In the old days, we honored that. We stayed close to our families, told stories, remembered our ancestors. We didn't fear the darkness because we understood it was sacred." She leaned forward. "But now, people fill the darkness with electric lights. They work through polar night like it's any other season. They forget to listen, forget to remember, forget to honor the dead. And when enough forgetting builds up, the lantern wakes. It offers what people think they want: light, warmth, an end to the darkness. And they follow it because they've forgotten why the darkness matters." I thought about all the calls I'd taken, all the dead voices describing where they were, what had happened to them, all the families who would never know what became of their loved ones without someone to document those final words. "How do we stop it?" I asked. Agnes shook her head. "You can't stop it. Not directly. The lantern is too old, too powerful. It was here before people came to this land. It will be here long after we're gone." "Then what can we do?" "You remember." Agnes reached out and placed her hand on the black logbook sitting on my desk. "Every name you write down, every story you record, every voice you witness. That's a person who won't be forgotten. And every person who isn't forgotten is a person the lantern can't fully consume. She stood up, adjusting her parka. The dead who call Line 7 aren't trapped because they died during polar night. They're trapped because no one remembered them. No one told their stories. No one carried their names forward into the light. She looked at me with those dark, knowing eyes. You've been answering the phone and writing things down. That's good. That's important. But it's not enough to just document. You have to acknowledge. You have to respond. The rules say not to respond. They say if a caller asks a question, I should hang up immediately. Agnes nodded slowly. Those rules were written by people who were afraid. Afraid of the dead. Afraid of what might happen if they engage with something they didn't understand. But fear doesn't free spirits, Cole. Connection does. She walked toward the door, then paused with her hand on the frame. Tonight, when Line 7 rings, don't just listen. Speak. Tell them you hear them. Tell them their names matter. Tell them they're not alone in the darkness. She smiled again, and this time there was warmth in it. That's the only weapon we have against things that feed on loneliness and forgetting. The simple act of saying, I hear you. I remember you. You matter. She left. The door closed behind her, and I sat alone at my desk, staring at the black logbook and the 67 years of names it contained. The rules said not to respond. The rules said to hang up if a caller asked a question. The rules had kept officers alive for decades, had maintained a careful boundary between the living and the dead. But maybe the rules weren't about protection. Maybe they were about containment. Keeping the dead at arm's length, using their information without acknowledging their humanity, treating them as sources of data rather than people who needed to be heard. Maybe the rules were why the lantern kept getting stronger, why it could wake every few decades and consume dozens of people, why the dead kept calling, year after year, century after century, trapped in loops of their final moments, because no one would simply say, I hear you. I looked at the clock, 5:47 p.m. In 6 hours, Line 7 would start ringing. And in 18 hours, December 18th would arrive, bringing either my death or my survival. I had a choice to make. Follow the rules and hope they were enough, or break them and trust that Agnes Hobson knew something the rule makers had missed. I picked up the black logbook, turned to the first page, started reading the names out loud, one by one, giving voice to 67 years of the forgotten dead. James Kinjic, November 1957, radar technician, lost in a blizzard near the DEW line station. The station was quiet. The darkness pressed against the windows. But somewhere, in the static between worlds, I hoped someone was listening. December 18th arrived at midnight with the sound of singing. I heard it through the station walls, hundreds of voices rising together in the darkness, a wordless hymn that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Through the reinforced windows, I could see lights moving on Akavak Street. Not flashlights or lanterns, but people. Hundreds of people walking past the station in a slow procession, their faces turned toward the southern horizon, the mouths open in that strange, beautiful song. Ruth stood at the dispatch desk, phone pressed to her ear, tears streaming down her face. They're all going, she said. Everyone. The whole town. They say they can see the sun. They say it's the most beautiful thing they've ever seen. I grabbed her arm. Don't go outside. Don't look at the sky." "I'm not." Her voice was steady despite the tears. "I can't see it. Whatever they're seeing, I can't see it. Neither can you." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "Agnes called me this afternoon. Told me what she told you. I've been saying the names. Every name in my grandmother's stories. Every name I can remember. Maybe that's why we can't see the light. Maybe remembering protects us." Outside, the procession continued. I recognized faces in the crowd. The mayor, walking arm in arm with his wife. The woman from the grocery store on Agvik Street. The teenagers who hung out behind the Top of the World Hotel. All of them singing. All of them smiling. All of them walking towards something I couldn't see. At 2 a.m., line 7 rang. I walked to the records room on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. The Harvest Gold phone sat in its cradle, ringing with that old mechanical clatter, and I picked it up before I could talk myself out of it. Static, deep and layered, like the sound of wind across a frozen ocean. Then a voice. Male. Young. Terrified. "This is Danny Tuvok. I went outside to help with the search parties, and I saw the light, and I followed it, and now I'm somewhere dark, and I can't find my way back." Danny. Grace Tuvok's nephew. The officer who'd been recovering bodies all day. I opened my mouth to write down his words, to document his death like I documented all the others. Then I stopped. Agnes's voice in my head. "Don't just listen. Speak." "Danny," I said. "I hear you." Silence on the other end. The static shifted, took on a different quality. Confused, almost startled. You can hear me?" "I can hear you. Your name is Danny Tuvok. You're a police officer in Utqiagvik. Your aunt is Grace, and she survived because she listened to the warning. You matter, Danny. You're not alone." A sound came through the phone, something between a sob and a laugh, raw with emotion. "I can see something," Danny said. "A light. Not the false sun, something different, smaller, warmer. It's coming from the direction of your voice." I gripped the phone harder. "Follow it. Follow my voice. You're not forgotten, Danny. Someone remembers you. Someone is listening." The static surged, crackled, then cleared, and Danny Tuvok's voice came through one more time, stronger now, less afraid. "I can see the station. I can see the lights in the windows. I'm coming back." The line went dead. I stood there, phone in hand, heart pounding. Then I heard the front door open and footsteps in the hallway, and Danny Tuvok stumbled into the records room, frost on his eyebrows, lips blue with cold, but alive, breathing, present. "I was in the dark," he said, collapsing into a chair. "I was in the dark for so long. And then I heard your voice, and there was this light, this tiny light, and I followed it, and..." He looked at me with eyes that held something I couldn't name. "You brought me back. How did you bring me back?" I didn't have an answer, but line 7 was ringing again. For the next 4 hours, I answered every call, and for every call, I broke the rules. When Margaret Tulik called again, still at the bottom of the ocean, still watching the bioluminescent shapes circle in the darkness, I told her that her grandson had recovered from the flu, that he'd caught 3 crabs in her honor, that the whole family was planning a memorial feast when the sun returned. "Thank you," she whispered through the static. Thank you for telling me. I think I can rest now." The line went dead, and something in the quality of the silence felt different. Final. Peaceful. When Harold Kunuk called, still lost in the light that felt like summer, I told him that his wife had put flowers on his grave every week for 30 years, that his children had named their own children after him, that his stories were still being told at family gatherings. "I remember now," he said, his voice clearing like fog burning off in morning sun. "I remember being loved. I forgot in the light. I forgot everything except the warmth. But now I remember." The static faded. Harold Kunuk didn't call again. One by one, I spoke to the dead. I told them their names mattered. I told them they weren't forgotten. I told them that someone in the living world was listening, was remembering, was carrying their stories forward. And one by one, they stopped calling. At 5:47 a.m., I answered a call from a voice I recognized. My own voice. But different this time. Not the panicked, desperate warning from 3 days ago, but something calmer, resigned. "This is Cole Hendricks," my voice said. "I'm calling from the moment of my death, December 18th. But something changed. Something's different." I held the phone tight against my ear. "What changed?" "You did." A pause. The static hummed. "In the version of December 18th where I died, I followed the rules. I documented everything, but I never spoke. I never acknowledged. I let the dead stay dead, and when the lantern came for me, I had no one to pull me back." I thought about Danny Tuvok, stumbling through the station door, alive because I'd given him a light to follow. "But you changed it," my voice continued. "You spoke to them. You remembered them. You broke the rules, and the rules were the only thing keeping the lantern fed. Fear and silence and forgetting. That's what it eats. And you stopped feeding it." The static shifted, lightened. "I'm not going to die today," my voice said. And for the first time, it didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like a realization. "The loop is broken. The death I was calling from, it's not going to happen anymore. You changed it. What happens now?" Silence. Then softly, "Now you keep doing what you're doing. Keep answering the phone. Keep speaking to the dead. Keep remembering." A sound that might have been a laugh. "And maybe, eventually, line 7 won't need to ring anymore. Maybe eventually, all the trapped ones will find their way home." The line went dead. I set down the phone, walked to the window, looked outside. The street was empty. The procession had stopped. The singing had faded. And on the southern horizon, where hundreds of people had been walking toward a light that wasn't there. Nothing. Just darkness. Just stars. Just the faint shimmer of aurora, green and purple, and beautiful in the way that real things are beautiful. The false sun was gone. Ruth appeared in the doorway. Her face was pale, exhausted, but there was something like hope in her eyes. "They're coming back," she said. "The people who walked outside. They're turning around. They're coming home." I looked at the clock. 6:23 a.m., December 18th. I was supposed to be dead. Instead, I was alive, and the lantern had retreated, and somewhere in the darkness between worlds, the dead were finally finding peace. I picked up the black logbook, turned to a fresh page, and at the top, in careful letters, I wrote, December 18th, the night the rules changed, the night we started listening. Then I put on the pot of coffee and waited for the sun to return. The sun returned on January 23rd, right on schedule. I stood outside the station with Ruth and Anna, watching the first sliver of orange light crest the southern horizon for the first time in 65 days. The cold bit into my cheeks, but I didn't mind. After everything that had happened, the sensation of feeling anything at all seemed like a gift. Polar night was over, the darkness had lifted, and Utkavik was still standing. We lost 31 people that winter, 31 who walked too far into the false light before it retreated, 31 whose bodies we recovered from the tundra in the days that followed. Their names are in the black logbook now, alongside the thousands who came before them. But unlike those earlier entries, these names have something different written beside them. Acknowledged, witnessed, at peace. Agnes Hobson helped me understand what Line 7 really was. She introduced me to an elder named Samuel Ackpick, who had worked at the DEW line station in 1957 when the phone was first installed. He told me about the military cables they'd laid through the permafrost, how they'd accidentally routed them through ground the Inupiaq had considered sacred for generations, places where the dead were believed to speak during the long darkness. The calls weren't supernatural in the way I'd first imagined. They were something stranger. Human consciousness caught in the electromagnetic field of the permafrost, final moments preserved and transmitted through copper wire, like voices trapped in amber. The dead weren't calling from an afterlife. They were calling from the last seconds of their lives, extended infinitely, looped and repeating until someone acknowledged them, until someone set them free. I still work the overnight shift, still answer Line 7 when it rings between 2 and 4 a.m., but the rules have changed. The laminated card in the records room has been replaced with a new one, written in my own handwriting. Rule 1. Answer every call. Rule 2. Listen carefully. Write down what they say. Rule 3. When they finish speaking, respond. Tell them you hear them. Tell them their name matters. Tell them they are not alone. Rule 4. Thank them for reaching out. Tell them it's okay to rest now. Rule 5. If they ask a question, answer honestly. They deserve truth, even in death. Rule 6. Remember their names. Speak them out loud. Carry them forward into the light. The calls come less frequently now. Sometimes a week passes without the phone ringing at all. Agnes says that's a good sign, but the backlog of forgotten dead is finally clearing, that 67 years of unacknowledged spirits are finding their way home. But new calls still come. People still die during polar night, still find themselves trapped in those final moments, still reach out through Line 7, hoping someone will answer. And when they do, I'm there, listening, responding, witnessing. Last week I got a call from Thomas Asok. The boy had been trapped inside the Aurora since 1962. His voice was different this time. Not scared, not confused, but calm, peaceful. "I can see my mother," he said through the static. "She's been waiting for me. She says it's time to come home." I told him I was glad. I told him his name would be remembered. I told him to go to his mother, that he'd been brave, for long enough. The line went quiet, and when I checked the logbook the next morning, his entry had changed. The words, "still calling," had faded from the page, replaced by a single word in handwriting that wasn't mine. Home. Sometimes the dead don't need rescue. They just need someone to hear their final words and remember they existed. That's what line 7 is for. That's what I'm for.